Konnichiwa minasan, I'm Joey. Today, me and my partner Chaho, we will as the tour guide of introducing the evolution of Japanese music. So, are you guys ready? Get ready on your passport and let's go! Ikuzo! Before I introduce to you the different types of Japanese music, let me introduce you to the history of Japanese music. Basically, traditional Japanese music was closely linked to music from Northeast Asian countries such as China and Korea. The movement from North has created the connection between Korea and Japan, has brought huge evidence in political, cultural, and social relationships. Over the Kofun period, Chinese culture gradually entered Japan, and from the 600s, increasingly directly from China. Tang China had a huge influence on Japan of the Nara and Heian periods. It was a time of rapid change, the single biggest aspect being the adaptation of Chinese writing into what had been an oral culture. This led to the development of notation systems for some musical genres. And the another major cultural change was the importation of Buddhism from India, which brought elements of Indian culture to Japan. The Shoshoin repository in Nara of objects from the Silk Road regions in testimony to the fact that Japan became a receptacle to cultural elements from as far west as Persia. And so, here's our road trip for the evolution of Japanese music. First up, we'll have the Gagaku from 589 AD. Our second stop will be the Shomoyo from the 8th century and Kabuki Theater from 1603. And our next stop will be the Western music to Japan in 1868. And finally, our final stop will be the jazz, rock, and J-pop in 20th century. So, are you guys ready? Let's get started. Welcome to our first stop, Gagaku. So Gagaku is a type of traditional music originated in 589 AD, strongly influenced by conventional Asian intentions, which has been performed at the Japanese imperial court for more than a millennium. Gagaku is made up of three bodies of musical pieces, which is Togaku, in the style of the Chinese Tang Dynasty, and Komagaku, said to have been transmitted from the Korean peninsula, and music of native composition associated with rituals of the Shinto religion. Also included in Gagaku are a small number of regional Japanese folk songs called saibar, which have been set in an elegant court style. Within the genre of music attributed as Gagaku, there are several forms, Kozumi and Okada, as they identify Kagura or god music as the music and dance performed within the context of Shinto ceremony. Our second stop will be the Shomyo, which is originated from the 8th century. Shomyo is a Japanese vocal ritual music. Usually, it was sang by Buddhist monks, in which breath control and breath expressions are being practiced. It originated in India and was introduced via Tibet and China to Japan. Each Buddhist sect has its own style of Shomyo singing. The Tendaishu and Shingonshu sects became the most musical and important representatives and have a history of about 1,200 years. In Shomyo, categories were based on Sanskrit, Chinese, and later on vernacular Japanese texts, with resultant musical implications. Currently, pure Shomyo only could be found at very few temples, especially during special ceremonies occasions. next stop is the Kabuki Theater. Kabuki is one of the four forms of Japanese classical theater, as Kabuki developed during the more than 250 years of peace of the Edo period, which is from 1603 to 1867. By far the most important instrument used in Kabuki is the three-string shamisen, included in the music genres that are performed on stage in view of the audience are the nagata, which is a long song style of lyrical music, and several types of narrative music in which a singer or chanter is accompanied by one or more shamisen and sometimes other instruments. The standard nagata ensemble includes several shamisen players as well as singers plus drum and flute players. Alright, so move on to our next part. Now I'm going to introduce the process of development of modern music in Japan, following with examples of few types of modern music. The development history of modern music in Japan was mostly affected by Western music. The whole country went through westernization during the Meiji Restoration, and the culture overall have changed to a large extent. They translated Western books and invited foreign teachers to bring their culture to Japan. The Western music entered Japan that time, as well as modern music were first created in East Asia. Now I'm going to introduce the development history of few types of music in Japan. Our first example is jazz music. Back to 1895, Japan has already started encouraging people to learn Western musical instruments. Later on, America has also brought the dancehall culture into Japan. As we all know, music is necessary for dances. And of course, there were no audio players but bands. And the music they played could be seen as the earliest jazz music in Japan. Following the development of dancehall culture and the encouragement of study with Western musical instruments, Japan then had already had many qualified individuals for jazz music. After the Meiji Restoration, more and more people in Japan started learning from the Western culture in different aspects, such as food, fashion, and of course music. The Western lifestyle was considered more valuable, and because of that, people listened to jazz music as one of the symbol of upper classes. At the same time, instead of imitate, Japanese have also created their own jazz music. In 1912, the first Japanese jazz band called Hatano Jazz Band was formed, and jazz music became more and more popular. But in 1936, all of the Western culture were banned in Japan, including dancehall and jazz music. But it didn't last very long. After the World War II, as America entered Japan again, then the jazz were brought again and having a better development till nowadays. And here is our next example, rock music. Rock music appeared and became popular very fast in 1950s from America. Following the impacts of Western to Japanese culture, it entered Japan very soon and got more popular in 1960s as the growth of group song bands in Japan, which was influenced by bands such as the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, performed with electronic instruments such as electronic guitar, electronic bass. At first, a lot of Japanese considered that their language did not fit in the style of rock music well, and people argued about whether the songs should be written in English or Japanese. Eventually, the group song bands no longer exist anymore because no one could have a clear answer for that problem. But then, as the development of different styles of rock music, while some bands insisted using their own language for songs, Japanese rock music has found its own path and gradually created many types of its own rock music instead of just following the Western's music taste.
and they started affecting the rock music trend of the world. For example, in 1980s, with the rise of hardcore punk and new wave music in Japan, a new type of band called retro rock band was first created in Japan. It has caught people's attention by its unique style of music works, costumes, and makeup. Now let's relax and watch a part of music video from one of the most famous retro rock band in Japan.
I'm walking in the lane 行くあてもなく傷ついた体虚し絡みつく恋のざわめき殺し続けてさまよういつまでも I feel like I forget you alone 眠りは麻薬遠にくれた心を静かに溶かす舞い上がる愛を踊らせて震える体を記憶のバラに包む I keep my love for you to myself
Here is our last example, J-pop music. J-pop has a very long and complicated history of development. Honestly, it is really hard to summarize in few sentences. The concept of J-pop was not defined until the early 90s, but the history of it can be traced back to 1910s. Long time ago when pop music was not defined, different generations had different types of their own pop music. Now I'm going to briefly introduce the origin of J-pop music. When jazz music found its popularity after the end of World War II, in order to keep entertaining people, many Japanese musicians started covering Western music with Japanese style. By then, Ryokoka, which basically means popular music, were born. By the 60s, with the impacts of Ryokoka, a new type of music called Kayukyoku appeared, literally means lyrical singing music. It is considered the true origin of J-pop music. It was a fusion of Japanese compositions with Western elements. After that, a lot of people were very inspired and started covering trend. They started translating Western songs to Japanese and covered them. However, some of them were inspired and started writing their own original lyrics. By then, J-pop has already found its place. Year by year, many different new kinds of music became popular in certain generations, such as rock, folk, city pop, hip hop, R&B, including idols. Those music keep affecting the trend and organizing the definitions of J-pop music until it became the one we're enjoying now. Alright, that's all, and this is the end of our video. Thank you everyone for watching it. Have a nice day.